What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? How you guys doing, gang? Welcome to a Tuesday show. Couple minutes late getting started. Apologies. Just was waiting on Ace Mine to pop up with FanDuel. The FanDuel pool hadn't been populated there, so I'm just waiting on the end of the sim. That should be another... Actually, it's finishing right now. So we're just waiting on the table to come together there. That's why you're seeing some empty columns on the FanDuel side of things right now. Everything's populated for DraftKings. We got that one done a couple minutes ago. But my name's Terry McBride. Welcome to the... I feel like I never, ever say that. My name. It's the kind of thing you should probably be getting out there. Anyway, my name's Terry McBride. This is the Roto Scouts unnamed basketball show. And if you're finding your way here for the first time, welcome. Handful of people here hanging out. I'm sure more will trickle in a bit. Really interesting 8-game slate. You can see, for one thing, our ownership in that sim that I ran for DraftKings came up super condensed as compared to the field. There are some very specific value squares that are coming up ridiculously popular. Keaton Wallace from Atlanta, 3,200. I thought I was being conservative, and we got him 94% of the time. Ryan Rollins from Milwaukee, 3,000. 53% of the time against the field. He's super popular. Keaton Wallace, pretty popular. The ownership for DraftKings that this ran against was had nobody as high as any of those top 5 guys, as you know, as is evident through how much we got to them above the field. But it was light across the board. I feel like it was wrong. Light, like way too light in some spots. I don't know if they're trying to be conservative. I don't know if it caught it in between updates. I'm going to open it now and double check. Because our concentration of ownership is partly because of that. Yeah, they've got nobody over 30%, which I'm highly skeptical about for DraftKings. With a value play like that, with a value play like these, if that is the case, then, this is that's our core. It's pretty straightforward. You take those guys and then you add to whatever else. Thank you very much. Good night. There we go. FanDuel's done. So let me get these FanDuel ones downloaded. It'll be probably a relatively tight, and again, I hate using the word core, but group of players on FanDuel as well. But I don't know that it's going to be quite what it was on DraftKings. We'll see. Yeah, it feels like it's going to be looser on FanDuel. Some 80s and 50s, but we've got a bigger spread. I feel like as we go down the board into the single digits a little bit more gradually. Look how quickly DraftKings just thins out, right? Right here, we're already at 20. That's not sorted, but the 10th guy, line 11, 32%. On FanDuel was 20% already on DraftKings. And DraftKings hits the single digits here with Franz Wagner and then really thins out down here. FanDuel's thin down that territory too. 8-gamer, we're going to be leaving some people behind. And it looks like it's mostly the appropriate people as you're going through it. But this is interesting if they're right about how that DraftKings slate is going to come up. Good boy, hi. Why don't you go lie down? Joker's here. Joker's interested with the DraftKings ownership as well. The cat's here too. I forgot to put the cat away. He just ran out. Hopefully he won't bother us. If he comes and dive bombs this show, we'll deal with it. So while we do have big pieces on FanDuel, it does look like it's a lot more spread out, or at least a little bit more spread out. It's going to make for an interesting slate across sites. Really good contests up tonight. DraftKings has a, $5 100, and FanDuel's got a $4 and change 50. Not bad. Anybody have a good day yesterday? That sprint slate, that was a lot of fun. I really liked that slate. I was 15, 20 points off the lead for a lot of it, with like room to catch up, and my lineups just kept gradually inching up and up and up and up, and it was a profitable day, but it Fell short of, big profits. It was, I think I made like $14. But that's not bad for having 11 lineups in. Another 2K to the bankroll, courtesy of a 20-point prop for Norm Powell to Mamba. Good call there. Yeah, I'm trying to remember what specifically with the Nets changes late. I had someone like Cam Thomas came down, which was okay. He didn't end up being great. I got to some Zaire Williams, who was meh. He was all right. I got to, what was the big value piece? I forget what it was yesterday. Doesn't matter. I'm trying to remember, though. There was one other key value that was like a guy that was in there that swapped in. It was like a 3 for 3. Where like Zaire Williams, that other value guy, went in, Cam Thomas came out, and somebody else swapped in. Yeah, I had like very little Wemby. As we talked about during the show, I had more of the combination of who was the top center? Is the Sabonis and whoever center, whatever that combo was. And yeah, Donovan had a nice day too. Yeah, Amen was a value. Yeah, we were on Amen for most of the day. I'm trying to remember what the other late thing that popped up was, but it is irrelevant. We've got 8 games to talk about today. We're obviously going position by position like we normally do. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe if you haven't already as we get started here. Site's rotoscouts.com. Let me pull up the odds board here, and we'll talk real quick about the game environments. Hawks and the Celtics. Celtics favored by 15 in a home game, 222.5 point total there. Jason Tatum, questionable through the day. Jaylen Brown expected back. Usual pieces and parts for Boston unless Tatum doesn't play. Then we'll take a harder look at that one. Al Horford's also questionable in that. So potentially a couple of down bench guys, but probably in his who they are type spot for Boston. A lot of pieces missing. Trey added to the missing pieces for Atlanta now. That's where some of that value that you're seeing at the top of the board there comes through. So definitely pieces from Atlanta despite being 15-point dogs in only a mediocre total game at 222.5. Charlotte and Orlando. Orlando favored by 8.5. A low 213-point total here. We've got some ugly totals on this slate. That one's at 213. Orlando's the biggest favorite out of the low-end games at 8.5. Thinking it through, take some LaMelo off the top. You could maybe some pieces and parts around, the Suggses of the world. I'm sure we'll get a little bit of Goga, but we'll probably be under the field. Maybe some of, the typical Orlando top-end pieces, but probably not much coming out of that game. Miami, Detroit, another low-end one, 214 total. At least we've only got a 2-point spread to deal with here. Some missing pieces on both sides. Jimmy Butler out. It benefits Bam a little bit, benefits some of the downstream guys a little bit more as far as the projections go. The Knicks and the Sixers, the return of Joel Embiid, 3-point spread in New York's favor on the road in Philly. Just a 212.5-point total, but definitely usable pieces up and down for the Knicks just with the concentration of minutes that they always see. And then I don't think we're getting any Embiid. I'm not really sure what we'll see from the Sixers. Low total in that one. Not sure how appealing they're going to end up getting. But with the idea that, they're going to want to keep up with the Knicks and maybe it runs it up a little bit, maybe something pops from that game. Toronto and Milwaukee, we're back to decent total, 225.5 there. Milwaukee favored by 8.5. No Dame Lillard, should definitely favor Giannis. It's also creating some of the other value bubble that you're seeing at the very top of the board there. As far as that guard situation goes, I feel like if we get too weighty on that value play, we might get burnt by like an AJ Green or somebody like that. But it is looking very sharp right now because he's very, very cheap. So we'll get into it. Phoenix and Utah, still no KD. That's why Devin Booker's coming up so much. 5.5 point spread there, favoring Phoenix on the road in Utah. 227.5 point total. Pretty juicy game. Definitely one we're going to want to focus on a little bit. A lot of Phoenix is going to come up and down the slate. So definitely a lot to go through there. Minnesota and Portland, just an is who they are spot for Minnesota. Portland, I doubt we see all that much of. Maybe a Simons or somebody pops a little bit, but he's one guy that sometimes slips through on decent prices. But on an 8-gamer, probably not. 221 point total there, 9 point spread in Minnesota's favor. I don't really see Portland hanging in that one. And then the last game of the night, Dallas and Golden State, just a 2.5 point spread. Golden State favorite at home, 234.5 point total. The biggest game of the night as far as the game total goes. Definitely very, very interested in having some shares in that game in a lot of lineups because there's a lot of different ways that one could go. I really don't like the configuration of the Dubs right now, what they're doing as far as minutes go, but they're going to come up. Oh, wow. I'm glad I got through that because all the lines just disappeared for an update. And then on the Mavs side, usual pieces as far as the front court goes. And then Luka up top is always going to be good. Kyrie's always going to be playable. Let's get back into some of these now. Mama's saying, I think we'll do a little very I better today. I think Mama got lost in the middle of that sentence. Let's do the injury breakdown real quick. All right. Probables. Tyler Hero is available. Isaiah Stewart's probable. Giannis is probable. Gary Trent Jr. is probable. Keontae George. Colin Sexton's available. Luka's probable. Questionables. Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Jaden Springer. Two big pieces, obviously, on the Celtics. It's a decent chunk of minutes and productivity if those guys don't go. Trey Mann, Cody Martin, Jalen Duren, Cam Payne, Miles McBride. Couple pieces for the Knicks that could create a little bit of a minutes crunch. If those guys don't play, I expect Deuce goes. We'll see what happens with Cam. Manuel Quickley's questionable. Yusuf Nurkic is questionable. Derek Lively is also questionable. He'll be an interesting piece. And then outs, Bogdan, Kobe Buffkin, DeAndre Hunter, Vic Krejci, Trae Young, Cody Zeller, Kristaps Porzingis, Miles Bridges continues to be out. Nick Richards and Mark Williams both continue to be out. Paulo Banchero and Wendell Carter Jr. continue to be out. Jimmy Butler's out. Ajer Thompson, Precious Achiuwa, Mitch Robinson, Tyrese Maxey is still out. Scotty Barnes still out. Bruce Brown, Kelly O, Garrett Temple's doubtful. Dame, as mentioned, out. Chris Middleton still out. Kevin Durant still out. Walker Kessler still out. Taylor Hendricks still out. Dante Exum is out. PJ Washington is doubtful. Don't expect him. And Matty Thybulle is out. It, sort of, Mamba. We'll see how they fall as far as these sim results. It's basically the team I'm most interested in, like, kind of taking a look at here. I expect we get to Steph at worst. Looks like we got a decent chunk of Melton, actually. We did get Steph. We got him a little below the field on both sites, but I have no issues if you want to drive Steph north. 8,500, 8,300. He's playing more minutes. He did hit a ceiling game just the other day, 55.5 in 36.5 minutes. You're getting that for 83, 85. That's definitely a nice padded ceiling game. He's put up 1.42 per minute for the season so far. So he's been very good. He's been a peak version of Steph, 148 on DraftKings. So I have no issues there, and I have no issues, honestly, expecting a ceiling. I gave him 33. If I give him another minute or two, we would easily level off with the field. So if you're thinking about doing that, if it's a minute, give him another 1.5 on either site, or 1.3, and double it if it's 2. I could realistically see 35 there. That wouldn't surprise me at all. Melton, I've got at 25. Played almost 27 the other day. He put up 39 fantasy points as a cheap value that hit the board super late. There was a little post-game talk about what they wanted the starting 5 to be going forward, and he was in it, and so was TJD. Which right now, we'll wait. It'll obviously change if he announces that that's actually going to be the starting 5. Right now, I didn't give that to Trace Jackson Davis, and I kind of halved it on Anthony Melton. I could see Melton getting up into the 28-minute range, though. This is probably the lower end of the minutes projection, and he still came up. Solid 5+ on FanDuel as far as a value, 5+ on DraftKings. Level with the field on both sites in the mid-20s, basically. And then just like odds and ends of Wiggins, a couple shares of Draymond, and then nobody else. Flat nobody else. So to answer your question, finally, yes, probably for all of those guys. The 4 guys above that, who are the most, the highest minutes projections anyway, the guys where the field's getting to anyway, those are the guys who are kind of in play. And really, there's a true ceiling on Melton because of the cost. There's definitely a ceiling on Steph. Honestly, Wiggins at 56, 53 also has room. So does Draymond at those prices. So those 4 guys, and really nobody else does much for me unless we get some specific news about like minutes, etc. down the board. There is the crunch also of the stupid-ass in-season tournament, the NBA Cup, which I hate. I think it's fun, but I hate it because it cost me $100,000 last year. Point being that these teams might press because not only do wins matter in these games, point differential also matters. Where that burnt me last year was they brought Kawhi Leonard back onto the court after he had left to go to the locker room after the end of the game to shoot 2 additional free throws. And not the first one, but the second one knocked me out of first place, which sucked. But yeah, so point differential matters. There's the idea that the prime players from most of these teams might see a few additional minutes. They're not going to treat it like playoff games, but they might treat it a little bit more importantly than your average regular season game. Does that make games more competitive? Does it make bad teams better? No, but it might mean that you'll see a little bit of additional run in blowout situations. You'll see a little bit of additional run for the key guys that might pick up an additional 2 minutes in each half at the end of the half in their just typical rotation stints. So there's wild cards like that. Stewart and Duran both in. Let's see. I had 26 and 20. Yeah, we're good there. It's the beauty of projecting the guys that are questionable is in most of the time. All right, so we've gone through the injuries, so let's dive into it. We've gone through the Warriors a little bit, but starting with the guards. So this is your biggie. With Trae out, we're just assuming that Keaton Wallace is going to step into those minutes. He looks like a massive, massive piece. In 14.5 minutes over 9 games, 14.5 minutes per game, he's had a 15% usage rate. He's put up 0.83 per minute, 11.8% assist rate, 61.6% true shooting so far. Shooting 41% on 2 threes a game. And remember, those 2 threes have come in just 14 minutes. So if we're tripling his minutes, we could probably expect a few more threes. He's not going to go out there and be Trae Young, but he doesn't have to at these prices. 4,000 on FanDuel. We got him 88% of the time, and our biggest impact against the field at the guard spot. And I think overall, 3,200 more to the point on DraftKings. We got him in most lineups. You can easily undercut that. Again, the ownership that this ran against, I really question the accuracy of. They don't have anybody above 30% in their ownership. I'm curious, where does, without giving me like an exact or who it is, where does the ownership peak for DraftKings at other places? Like, what's the highest projected guy? Just tell me that. I'm just really curious how they came up with 30% top on everybody. Because like value plays like this should be crashing the top of the board. Oh, you know what I should check is... Let me reload again. I'm going to keep giving them the chance to update this, too. Let's see what happens. Nope. Man, interesting. So they're lighter than I am on Wallace's minutes, which I guess is biting his ownership a little bit. He's still the second highest projected guy as far as ownership goes. But our massive share here is like 3x what they're projecting. So you can trim that. You can go down to 50% and still have a nice little edge against the field. I think he's going to be a good enough value, even if I take 3-4 minutes away, which I think is totally realistic. That's just a good piece of value. He would still be a 6+, approaching 7, and we're looking for 5.5. You've also got Ryan Rollins at just $3,000 at point guard only. So you've got a $3,000 and a $3,200 point guard to work with, and then you've got multi-position on all the other guys that come up big time, except for Steph at the point guard position. But obviously we've got a guard spot, we've got a util spot to work with, so we can get Steph plus, and then still have room for most of those, for several of those guys. I think we're going to see a decent amount of that. Probably like the top lineups where we did get Steph are going to trend up north and have both of those value guys in. Rollins is only projected at 22 minutes. He's been a 1.01 per minute player so far this season, but that comes in just 5.5 minutes a game over 8 games. Last time out, 12.2 minutes, 9.2 fantasy points. Obviously not at the point per minute plus pace, but he's just a free square on both sites. 3,000 dead men on DraftKings at point guard. Shooting guard eligible on FanDuel, 3,600. We got him just 21% of the time on FanDuel and just kind of level with the field over there. He's a much, much, much bigger piece on the DraftKings slate. 53%, and again, above the field because the field is in like the 30s. Actually, the field slipped even further. Where did he go? Ooh, interesting. They squished him down. They're... So it looks like they're leaning more toward AJ Green, who I mentioned a minute ago as the guy that I would be worried would potentially burn this play, the Ryan Rollins play. So that's interesting. They've also got Delon Wright here, but he's kind of fallen out of favor, and I don't think that's going to be who picks this up. But it is definitely interesting with Green here. In 25 minutes, Green came up 8% of the time on FanDuel and not at all on DraftKings. And honestly, that's kind of accounting for the minutes. I don't think I would go beyond like 26, 28 if I give him an uptick. But what I could do probably is give him a little bit more rate. It's interesting that they pivoted this hard. That was not the case earlier. I'm already giving him more rate. I know this is fun, but this becomes kind of a key question. So I want to glance at it here. If you take him up into AJ Green, if you take him up into like the 0.85-ish range, he becomes more interesting, and I think that's what they did. We're worlds different on AJ Green right now. It's been a 0.75 per minute player this season, and I've got him right in that range. So I'm giving him credit for what he's done this year, and then you could give him a little bit more. But taking him up into the mid 0.8s or higher seems a little bit of a stretch. He was a .65 player last season on 15% usage for the year. He did go out and put up 24-6 in 27 minutes the other night. So there is, that's shy of 1.0, but it's definitely above 0.75. I think they're straight giving him this, basically. It's going to complicate our lives. This is the exact situation that I was saying I think could burn that Ryan Rollins spot. And again, Rollins, is not like I'm giving him a ton of minutes, but if I cut that to 18, he comes up and he's going to be in that value bucket, but it would be a lot less here, and it would be significantly less over there as well. This would probably be mid-20s and level or below the field. Actually, that would be still above the field based on their changes. Really interesting. Keep an eye on that one. If you see AJ Green jump into the 21-22 fantasy point range, then he might be more interesting here. That would be the change if I give him credit for that rate that he put up the other day. I'm not really seeing it, though. I don't really know that there's enough justification for that. I might give him a little more. Definitely going to flag him. I'm going to flag Ryan Rollins as well. I really don't like that spot. Continuing on, Devin Booker. As mentioned, 8,800 both guard spots on DraftKings. Looks absolutely fantastic. 78% of them against the field, and one of our strongest plays against the field for, honestly, one of the best players on the slate overall. And going to have the world to do with no Kevin Durant there. Love that spot. Booker put up 46-2 in 43 and change minutes the other day. I think that one, if I'm remembering correctly, that went to overtime. So Grayson Allen get to 26.7 minutes in that game, but put up only 12.7 FanDuel points because he's Grayson Allen. So 0.79 per minute player, but with an uptick in usage, there should be more ability there. He was at 0.78 on 14% last year. He's seen 19% so far this year. That should benefit him. He's got a 49% true shooting so far this season. He's taking 5.9 threes a game and making 31.9% of them, and that's no good. But if a couple more of those fall and he comes away with a couple steals after tripping somebody a couple of times during the game, you could see a nice little return on your 41, your 37 across sites at shooting guard, small forward on both sites. 53% exposure on top 150 for Grayson Allen, level with the field, 64% and above the field on DraftKings because, again, he's just 37 over there. So Allen is just a solid value piece on both sites that you probably should get a fair chunk of. And he makes for at least a somewhat acceptable rotation to maybe trim down your exposure on Rollins if the Rollins play drops. The thing to watch with him is if he drops below 20, that value starts peeling off quicker. Still at 3,000, even if he's 18, even if he's 17, there's still value there. It's just shaped a little differently. But Booker, as far as like the stars, as far as our first good player, love having tons of shares of Booker. 65% on FanDuel. Get there tons. He's been at 25.7% usage on the season, but again, no Kevin Durant feeds him additional opportunities. 28.9 last year. He had a 1.23 per minute. This is what I would expect from Devin Booker in this situation. Melton, as mentioned, comes up pretty significantly, 27%, level with the field on DraftKings. Another very cheap option at both guard spots, 4,200 over there. Probably a more sound, proven, concrete NBA player than the Keaton Wallaces, the Ryan Rollinses of the world. 0.93 per minute on 17% usage. Last year, 1.09 on 22.1% this year. It's just in 5 games. He was out for a little bit. He's played 19-ish minutes a night. Giving him a little bit more than that because that's what he's gotten now. 26-8 the other day. I've got him at 25. A little bit conservative about it. There's room again, though, to give him 25, 28. I think somewhere in that territory. And it just makes him look better if you do. 25% of them slightly below the field, but taking them to the field is fine on FanDuel. We're level with the field at 27 on DraftKings. Bradley Beal's also going to benefit in Phoenix from no KD. We got him 34% of the time. It's not like we're bypassing the Bradley Beal play. It's just I'm more enthusiastic about Booker. Booker's the better of the two players. He's going to have the more direct representation, but you can save $2,000 by going to Bradley Beal in that spot and get good production. He put up a 45-6 that's not far off the 46-2. He just did it in 5 fewer minutes, which is actually a good thing. But Bradley Beal, I don't think, is quite the producer anymore that Booker is. 0.99 last year, 0.93 this year. But again, an uptick from this at least to that territory, and if not beyond. The other day, he was a little bit beyond. 7,000 on DraftKings. We got him 20%, a little bit less than the field, 34%. A little bit harder of an undercut to the field on him on FanDuel, but still a big, big chunk. Wow, Brandon Miller is a radically different price play across sites. Good player. 0.89 last year, but 1.11 on a minor uptick in usage so far this year in his 6 games. Playing about 28 minutes a night, but has seen an uptick back to starters minutes. I've got him at 33 now. He only costs 66 on DraftKings. That puts him in play for sure. 5.17 value score. He's getting chewed up as far as this exposure goes, just by so many shares going to those guys. And that's going to be true as we talk through all of these guys down here on these thin numbers. You can take chunks out of here and distribute it down the board and get to more of those guys because there are effective players down there. It's just a very specific price scheme and ownership that this ran against, creating this gigantic bubble up here. But again, if they're right, that's where you want to be. So Miller at 114 on DraftKings, 16%. If you want to level that off with the field in the low 20s, fine, 6,600. At 7,500 on FanDuel, we really didn't get him. That puts him at just a 4 value score, 4-4. That's not an effective option, really. He could hit a decent upside game. He could come out and do, this 40.6 minutes, 39.4 FanDuel points. Upside beyond that for sure. If he goes out and plays another 40-minute night, or even, plays, let's say 36, he's got upside into the 45, 50 point range on the right night. But we're not projecting him that way, and he is not effectively priced for his median game. Clay, a lot more value on FanDuel, where he's 4,900 forward and guard eligible, 51 on FanDuel or on DraftKings, just a little bit higher against that DraftKings cap, 14% of the time, and below the field over there. 42% of the time level with the field as a FanDuel option. That's really interesting. I expect a lot of that is probably falling into the small forward position, given all the guard eligibility around him that's taken up so much ownership. Just looks like Clay's an interesting value, who he is, mid-board type value guy. But bear in mind, we're talking about a version of Clay that's only at 0.76 per minute this season. 18% usage in the average game. 23% last year, 0.91 per minute last year. That was a decline, and now we're deeper into the decline. So, yeah, there's upside, but, 32 and a half minutes the other day, 21 FanDuel points. That's not a ceiling game. Does Clay have a revenge in his heart? I bet you the chat's calling for Clay revenge. Let's see. Get a Woodhouse. What's going on, buddy? K Wood. You're calling me T McBee? I'll call you K Wood. Toronto is so bad. You don't think Adrian Green could have that high rate in this game environment? I do. It's just I don't want to project him up super high. Right? Like I already gave him what he's doing this year. If I give him a little bit more on top of that, I think it's fair. But what I don't want to do is put him 1 or something like that, like what he did in that specific other game. Could he do it? Sure. It's in the realm of possibility, if not probability. But I don't think it would be the correct way to project that game and say that that's his average, that's his median, and he goes up from there. I think that's his ceiling. So you don't project the ceiling, you project, the median. I'm going to lose until I win the millies here. What's going on, bud? Wallace 78 is the highest owned. That makes a lot more sense to me. So, again, our 94% exposure here would be above that field mark. But if I ran it with that ownership, it would be maybe bubbling up differently. So I really do think some of the DraftKings top end is a little skewed here. If they update, which I hope they do, I'll give it a rerun in the background. They're holding firm so far, though. That is surprising. Let me see if do the Ace Mine guys have their ownership up? They don't. I don't think. Hold on. Nope. I would love to rerun that with different ownership. So what I think would the situation would be there would be that we would probably be more 10, 15 points lower than this and maybe closer to the field on like this kind or maybe even level, but a super, super big chunk of Keaton Wallace still. But I think the exposure that the field had would knock down some of those ROI numbers on the player and level them off slightly, where we wouldn't be 94 against 78. We'd be like, again, like 82, 73, 70, 68, something like that. But again, big chunks, still a major piece of potential value. Booker, I think, would probably land exactly the same, even if his ownership goes up. Probably the same with Allen. I'd be curious about the impact of Rollins as well. But again, if we're already wrestling with that situation with AJ Green, that probably comes down anyway. But again, at 3,000, even if we take 2 or 3 points away, that is still going to come up. But this bubble is probably slightly artificial. There are, which again feeds the idea that there are a few more shares for all of these guys. It's not significant. Everybody that we got under the field is still going to be under the field. But you've got some more shares. It's probably not 8%, it's 10, 12. It's not 10, it's 15, and so on and so forth. Maybe not that dramatic. Those add up quickly. So again, Clay, as far as like, revenge narratives and stuff go, it's not something I like to chase. It's completely unquantifiable. But a guy who is a shot taker, he needs to not make it stupid and say be a shot maker, but that is exactly the case. But the shots will be there for him to attempt if he wants them. So it wouldn't completely surprise me to see Clay have a successful day at 4,900, 5,100 across sites. We got him. I'm okay with this exposure, but in 150 lineups, maybe I'd whittle that down a little bit just to share some with some of the downboard guys who look good on FanDuel. 14%, I'm a lot more comfy with on DraftKings. Steph, again, just topping out, 12%, 13. But if you want to push that into the 20s, you're fine. It's Steph Curry. I'm not worried about it. He's priced in the 8,000s and still has 50, 60 point upside. Tyler Herro's interesting. Much bigger piece on the FanDuel slate. Both guard spots, 7,200 there. 74, same positioning on DraftKings. 12%, a little bit below the field. If you want to level them, that's fine. That's a decent investment for some of those shares. Again, no Jimmy there. So Hero's going to directly benefit. 110 for the season. He's already slightly outperforming last year on slightly less usage. But plenty of opportunity for Hero to handle a decent chunk of the scoring load today. So I don't mind that spot as an effective mid-range piece. I would expect to see a good amount of Tyler Hero, probably in the probably in the shooting guard spot. But we'll see how it comes up when we look at lineups a little bit later. We'll pull up Ace Mine at the end of the show, and we'll take a look at lineups for those who don't make it that far. Hit the like button if you're out there. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel so when you know when these shows kick off. 2% of 9% of Mike Conley and below the field on FanDuel, 10% and below the field on DraftKings. I'm fine with that. Conley's just is who he is. 0.92 last year, 0.91 this year on slightly increased usage. Still a good facilitator, 28.2% assist rate. His shot on the additional usage, actually, maybe there is a little bit, and we looked at this, I think, the other day. Maybe there is a little bit of additional potential room here, because he is taking This amounts to 1.5 shots probably, but he's taking a little bit more upside. He's just not making them. Right? He's taken 5 threes a game. He's made 30% of his threes. He's got a 46% true shooting so far this season. So there's definitely a little room for Mike Conley to be better than this .91 and get back to .92. He could be a .95-ish. We're talking about fractions. Well, technically we're talking about decimals, but we're talking about minor points. But there's a little bit of room there if that shot starts falling again. But we're talking about minor minutes as well, 24-ish minutes a night. Jaden Ivey not really looking like a piece on FanDuel, just 8% on DraftKings and below the field. Again, these are the guys that I would say spread some of those shares down to. These guys who are just like yellow, slightly down arrows, and just level those guys with the field as best as possible. A couple more shares, taking any of these guys into the 10% range is fine. These guys into the 15, 18% range is fine. Ivy at .98 for 6,200 point guard, shooting guard. Not the best fit necessarily with all the value that's going through that position, though. On FanDuel, he didn't come up at all at 66. Beasley, mix and match piece, never one of my favorites. Super low per minute guy. .66 last year, .68 this year. Always disappoints. Not that we really want to ride on anecdotal nonsense like that. He does obviously get there from time to time. 7% of them on DraftKings. 11% on FanDuel. I'd rather be playing on DraftKings where I would need less of them. Minor piece. Again, we've got so many pieces of value. I'm not sure that I would sacrifice shares of these value guys to take additional shares beyond like 7-8% of Beasley. Honestly, if I could sacrifice that 7% of Beasley directly into additional shares of one of those guys, I think I would probably take it in that direction. Even though Beasley's way lower owned than any of those guys by the field. Just not a fan of the player. It's also, that game environment, again, is 214-point total. It's just going to be a grindy fist fight of a game. I don't see that being a Malik Beasley standout scoring spot. Jaylen Brown, definitely happy to have more of. 9%, little below the field, 6%, little below the field, especially if Tatum doesn't go. Keep an eye on that. But Jalen's a 114 per minute player, 30% usage player. Buying a guy like that at 83, 82, definite ceiling there. But he's only a 4.85, 5.03 value score. So that's where we land in the single digits. But if you wanted to take Jalen into the 12, 15% range, be level or maybe slightly ahead of the field, I think that's a decision you can make on a slate like this. Dyson Daniels, price up, 7,000, earning it. 1.02 per minute. A lot of work from steals is padding those stats a little bit, but he's very, very good at that. So it seems like an ongoing trait. He is up to 6,000 on DraftKings, where I expect we got more of him. 6% of the time against the field. Again, 10% is fine. 6% is also fine. Alexander Walker, a lower end per minute guy. I would rather have Dyson Daniels in every situation than Alexander Walker. We didn't get either one on FanDuel. We got 6% of both on DraftKings. To be fair, Noah is only a $3,500 option at both guard spots, but we do have plenty of shares of other guys at that price, and he's just in a typical situation for him. He plays about 23 minutes a night. I've got him at 24. Last time out, played 25-7, put up 23.1 FanDuel points. That's slightly ahead of his average. If he did that for 3,500, he would be an okay value square, but not slate breaking, not with all those other options. Luka, 5%. You can triple that. You can quadruple that and be perfectly fine. If you want more Luka, take more Luka. Giannis is probably gobbling up most of that salary, given I think it's like 5-point projection difference. But Luka is obviously more than capable of getting there. Golden State, pretty decent defensive team, though. I'll give them that much. 21% of Luka on the FanDuel slate. We're getting a nice chunk over there. Probably more Starsy Scrubsy on FanDuel as far as the builds go, but he is below the field on the FanDuel slate as well. Garrison Matthews, just a mix and match piece at best, 5%, 8%, below the field. 3,800, he is yet another cheap shooting guard. Plenty to do for Atlanta today. Don't love the per minute, 0.56 last year on 11% usage. He went up to 14% in his 10 games and 22 minutes a night so far this year. He's returned, 0.2 of a point better, so 0.77. But just not a good per minute option with so many directions to turn on an 8-gamer. LaMelo and Anthony Edwards. You can take more shares of either of these guys. Looks like we got to Ant on FanDuel the most. 8,700 is a great price to find him. That's an interesting price difference between those two players. LaMelo's been the better per minute guy. He was last year. He is this year. But is there really 1,200 separation? Different positions, obviously. That's a big chunk of salary to put between those two players. That's really interesting. 20% of Ant and none of LaMelo as far as FanDuel goes. 3%, 2% on DraftKings below the field on both. Harder undercut to the field for Ant at 8,800 on DraftKings. That price difference exists between them on that side as well. Definitely can take additional shares of either of these stars, though. They're worth it. LaMelo at 136, 145 DraftKings, 115, 124 for Ant. Tons and tons of upside any given slate with those guys. Ant should be able to do whatever he wants against Portland. LaMelo maybe a little bit more challenged by Orlando and that game environment. So I would throw that into the mix a little. Not really sweating the blowout. We're not worried about blowouts all that much anyway, and it's not something we want to project. And again, with the stupid as NBA Cup, they're probably gonna give everybody run to run that score up. Terry Rozier, 2% on both sides below the field, mix and match player. Again, another guy who could benefit a little bit from a little bit more to do. Just average minutes, generally average player though. 0.86 per minute so far this year. 1.06 on 25% usage last year. So if he sees an uptick in usage to like that kind of territory, maybe he does vault ahead of this. But I think even 6,100, even with a little bit of a kick, he'd probably not get much more than to, this kind of 12%, 7,400 for Hero. Maybe he levels off with Hero. Not looking like a major piece, though. Again, that's just a grindy game environment. Down the board, we are really thin on DraftKings shares on everybody, but obviously this is a good list of players. Look at all those decent projections. So, Kyrie, Drew Holiday, Jalen Suggs, Dante DiVincenzo, Jalen Brunson, Derek White. I'll leave out the KCPs, the Anthony Blacks of the world. Quickly, Simons, Sexton, Mikal Bridges, Kelly Oubre, Buddy Hield, Gary Trent. Most of the other Warriors. There are definitely names that you can work with, at least at the top part of this. I would never tell you that you can't have any shares of Jalen Brunson. We got him 1% of the time. It's just below the field. But a player like that, even in his diminished form so far this year, 115 DraftKings, 110 FanDuel. He was a 124 player on FanDuel. Slightly less usage this year, but more to the point, it's just not been coming together completely for him in a lot of games. Whatever that means. But there's always going to be upside there. And if you get Brunson owned by the public on a slate like this in the, let's call that 5-8% range, and you took him to 10-12% instead of the 1%, perfectly fine. And you're carving out a little advantage on a good player. Same thing with a guy like Kyrie. 120 this year, 122 on DraftKings. We got him in one share of our 150. If you want to put him in 10 shares of your 150 instead, it's fine. On FanDuel, we did get to some Jalen Suggs, 14% against the field. A little bit of an undercut, but definitely got him. We got a little bit of Derek White. More Derek White if Tatum doesn't go. Keontae George came up a little bit, 9%, 8% of AJ Green, which again, if you see him go up above 20, you're going to want more on both sites. Keep an eye on that one as far as the projection goes. Quickly, just is who he is, shares over here. Same thing with anybody else. But again, a lot of guys on the cutting room floor at the guard spot. Jump to forwards. I know we're dragging our feet a little bit here, but that was a lot to go through as far as guards go. Quickly out. There you go. So don't play quickly. That will just basically take us back to the situation we had been seeing already in Toronto. It'll give RJ a little bit of a nudge. Probably like a 2 and change fantasy point bump for RJ. And then some downstream minutes impact. Davion Mitchell probably picks some back up. Yeah, he'll pick up 5-6 minutes. It's a 28-minute drop that I got to take care of. Baji up. Mitchell benefits. A couple of the down bench guys will benefit with a few minutes apiece. I think probably the most interesting thing that's going to happen from that, though, is the potential slight uptick for a couple fantasy points for RJ Barrett. It'll just put him back in that good situation that we had him in those first couple games. Do that right now. All right, we'll go from here. So, yeah, RJ's going to get a little uptick, and we'll go from there as far as the downstream stuff goes. Good note, though, Power. Thank you, buddy. Andy's here. What's going on, Andy? Beantown's here. What's happening, fella? Peyton ends up out loving Time Lord. Have we seen minutes from him yet? What's the most he's played? $17. It's only been 2 games. I thought we had 3. I just don't know what the minutes, the condition looks like. He's a very, very good per minute player. They do have... I just don't know that we'll have healthy minutes into like the 20s or something like that for him. I think he's probably just limited in the teens right now. And then like they do have some other bodies there that have played some minutes. So it'll be interesting. Definitely would be a spot to, see what happens in the starting lineup, for one. That game's at the end of the night, so it's a potential swap spot. It's a 10 o'clock game. So if you have shares of Dallas Golden State, which you absolutely should, and then you have shares in that game, it creates a lot of swappability at worst. Just make sure that some of that is going through the center if you're talking about having some shares of Ayton or pivoting into shares of Time Lord or any of the others. What's the positioning on those guys? Time Lord does have power forward on DraftKings, and he's only 3,100, which would benefit him, honestly, in basically any situation. I could honestly give him a little bit more already, actually. The power forward for him becomes interesting. He's center only on FanDuel, Klingon center only. And then if you get Duop Reith into the mix, he's center only on both. I believe he's with the team. Played 5 minutes the other day. But, yeah, I don't know that we go directly to Time Lord, but he will see a bump. There he is. So on DraftKings, we did get one share of him at the 3,100 with just a standard projection, and that's an 11.9 projection. which honestly is probably a little bit light considering his talent level. 132 in his minor minutes so far. 2 games, 14.2 minutes. I mean, the smallest of possible samples. He was a 1.09 player last year. And we've seen him be, a good per minute guy when he's healthy. You could probably give him an additional 1.5 on top of what I've got just right now in the 12 minutes and be okay. And maybe that would take him into the 3 or 4% range. And then, if we gave him 18 minutes instead, at the DraftKings price at 31 with that power forward eligibility, he would definitely start to pick up shares. So you're not wrong there, but it would be definitely one to, at worst, if you do make that pivot, watch what happens with that starting lineup late in the night and watch any possible word about what they might do. A lot more straightforward, viable play up at the top of the board with Giannis Antetokounmpo up there. 60% owned on FanDuel and level with the field there. 86% on DraftKings. I suspect that the number that ran against was also low. He was in that group of high-end guys. So was Grayson Allen, who we already talked about. But Giannis is Giannis. You can just fire away with those shares. No Dame. Giannis is going to have to do everything for that team tonight. 163 per minute so far this year on DraftKings. 161 on FanDuel. Basically the same level that he was at last year. And he's getting a little bit more usage so far in 9 games this year. 35.5% usage, 32% last year. A lot of problems in Milwaukee right now, but Giannis isn't exactly one of them. 71.1 FanDuel points in 39.2 minutes the other day. Can I interest you in a score like that? I think I can. So I think you get as much Giannis as you can carry. If you want to undercut the DraftKings number by a little bit, bring some of those shares back to the field, level out 2 spots and buy in on a Booker and an upgrade in a different one, I get it. That makes sense. But I think there's room for Giannis and Booker in a lot of those lineups, and I'm pretty sure we're going to get it. Bradley Beal, we've talked about. Grayson Allen, we've talked about. Both guys, keys. Jalen Johnson, definitely interesting. Going to be the best player on Atlanta right now for this game anyway. 8,600, 37% of them on the FanDuel slate. He's been a 115 per minute player on increased usage this year. Good facilitator, good rebounder, just, a jack of all trades type player from maybe not the top shelf, but that next tier down. 8,600 on DraftKings. We got him 19% of the time. A little bit of an undercut to the field. But again, that's because there's so much weight going in this direction. So if you start taking haircuts, you can start feeding additional shares in. No issues taking Jalen back to the field or even slightly above. Like being at or above the field on FanDuel. Miller, we talked about in the guards. So did Clay. Grant Williams, 30-minute projection. Didn't get him at all on FanDuel, which I'm kind of happy about. DraftKings, he's only 4,900 versus the 54 they're asking for him on FanDuel. He's a 4.42 value on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's sub 5, 4.93. I'm actually kind of surprised he slipped into this many shares, but there's not a ton of 5+ even value guys. Remember, on DraftKings, typically we're looking for 5.5. Technically, the only guy that qualifies is Grayson Allen. Cody Martin is the next closest at 5.45. Then it's Giannis. And then we get a couple of mid-5s here, so it's not crazy that Grant Williams at a 4.93 got into some shares, 12%. If you have a favorite in like this group, excluding Jalen Johnson from that, or honestly including him, but he's a different price tier. But if you have a favorite from that group, or we could throw Franz into that so that Jalen has a balance, shifting those shares around to take positions on any one of those guys, and it doesn't have to be, favorite like I like that guy, like favorite in that guy's projected at the side I look at ownership on to be way under the field, and Terry Sims said to get him a little bit more, more than what they're projecting. Plenty of room within that block of guys to shift shares around. All those guys at worst look like this is who they are kind of a spot. But there are some very low per minute guys in that group, and that's why I'm also fine with just getting him in the 10 to 12% range. Clay's in there. He hasn't been good per minute this year, but he's one of the bigger upside guys, I would say. Grant Williams at 0.81 is fine. Cody Martin at 0.86 is fine, but low usage, 15% usage guys. You go all the way down to 9% usage on Taurean Prince this year. Got him at 29 minutes. It's exactly what he's been playing over 10 games. He did put up a 27.3, but he needed 38 minutes to get there. There's not a ton of value in Taurean Prince. We didn't get him. We got him in 1 share on FanDuel, 10% on DraftKings. That's a guy I'm happy to sacrifice to the DFS gods a little bit here. And if it's a matter of saying for 1,000 less, I can take small forward shares of Cody Martin over Taurean Prince and pick up 0.2 per minute and pick up, with a low usage guy, pick up a decent amount of additional shots. Then Prince could benefit from no Dame as far as a few shots there, but that's not really him. His .65s also come with 70.8% true shooting. So I think that's a worthwhile pivot at small forward. You could do it with one of these other guys, but you need more salary, where if you did it with Cody Martin directly, you're actually saving $100. You've also got $3,500 Ryan Dunn a couple spots later, which honestly, to save $600 and go down from Taurean Prince is also not completely crazy. They're at the exact same 4.9 value score. You're just dealing with a slightly lighter minutes projection, 23 minutes for Ryan Dunn. But Dunn's been at 0.77 per minute. He's also at 15% usage. It's weird to try and sell a guy that's that low usage, but that is a major difference between him and Taurean Prince as far as a couple potential shots. So if you can save $600 there and you're not defying the sim in any way, it's 1 share between those guys. I wouldn't mind taking all 10% of that, or half of it anyway, and getting a discount here or upgrading there. Lowry Markkanen 4% on FanDuel. Jaylen Brown 9%. We talked about Jaylen a little bit. Markkanen's a decent proposition over there. 117 per minute last year on 24% usage. This year we've been down at 1.0 on 22.5. Not a guy who just exclusively benefits from shots, obviously. Fills multiple categories, double digits across the board in assist rate and rebounding rate, 54.1% true shooting. There's any given slate upside there for Markkanen. He's just fine on FanDuel. He's also just kind of fine on DraftKings at 74. Just looks like who he is. But against Phoenix, there should be a little bit of room for additional shares on him. I have no problem taking him up into the 10% range. I skipped over Franz on FanDuel. We only got him 10% of the time. Undercut to the field on DraftKings. 17% of the time. He's a little bit more important on FanDuel, but we are below the field there. 8,200. He's probably the biggest exposed piece from Orlando. We didn't see Suggs as we were going through. Or maybe I briefly mentioned him. Franz has been good in this enhanced role. 1-2-1 per minute so far on 29.3% usage, and that's going to be an ongoing situation with the missing pieces. Is it 1-2-3 DraftKings? We did get him, but again, below the field. He's in that mix, though, if you want to take some Jalen Johnson shares and pour him down into Franz Wagner, or if you want to find some Giannis and pour it down into both guys and take down undercut on one other mid-range guy. It's viable. It's a good per minute player. Put up 41.3 and 28.6 minutes the other day on FanDuel. Wiggins is just fairly priced. 5,600 on FanDuel, 5,300 on DraftKings for a guy who can go out and do this. 47 FanDuel points in 35-2 the other day. He's been at 1.06 for the season. He was a 0.87 per minute player last year. He's played just 26.5 minutes per game this season. But again, that was a little uptick the other day. Gave him a little bit more. He's played 8 of their games. I don't really see an issue with taking at least this 6% of Andrew Wiggins. He's one of the more interesting potential surprise upside guys of the day. Right, with everybody kind of focusing in different directions. Yeah, these are undercuts to the field at 6, but figure the field's 10, 12 against those numbers. It could be a reasonable day for Andrew Wiggins to have an upside game, especially if he plays into the 30s again, because he's priced like he's playing in the 20s, and I've got him on the lower end of what I think his range is. But again, they have been deliberately doing that all season. Tatum, if he goes, is just fine. Looks like Jason Tatum. You can always take more shares of Tatum, and I think I probably would. I would want at least like 10% on both sites. and that's fine. You'd just be leveling with the field. John Collins is an undercut to the field on FanDuel at 7, 5% on DraftKings, kind of an undercut on both sites. 64, 63, just looks like an average play. Julius Randle comes up interesting. 32% on FanDuel. That's an undercut to the FanDuel ownership. 7,300 power forward only there. He's 77 power forward and center on DraftKings. It's a big price difference. I like Randle. I think he's an underrated overall player. He's at 0.94 per minute this season on 14.8% usage. He also picks up rebounding. He also picks up assists through being a good facilitator. 42 points in 43-ish minutes the other day. There's enough upside. Sorry, did I skip to Josh Hart? I did. 32 points in 35-7 the other day. That sounds more like a Randle game. I think there's room for this much Randle on FanDuel, but you could obviously shave that down a little if you want more shares of better plays up there. And on DraftKings, it's probably about right, 5-8%, somewhere in that territory. That's a little bit of a big price. At least he's got the power forward and center eligibility, though. 16% of Naz Reid, mix and match kind of a play. Should be upside in that game, certainly. It's not expensive for his per minute output. If he sees more than 24 minutes, he typically does deliver a good value game. Worst case, you're coming in around these medians. Tobias, just a mix and match guy across sites. We did get 10% of De Silva as another piece from Orlando. 4,000 small forward only on FanDuel. That's an undercut to the field. He's just been at 0.59 over his 7 games, his 24 minutes a night so far. I think at best he's a mix and match type. I don't even care if I get to the 10%, honestly. I don't think that's a great looking spot. 20% of RJ already, and again, this is going to go up, so RJ is going to become a play on FanDuel. We didn't get him at all. He's 8,300 on DraftKings. He'll probably get projected into the 39 territory when I edit. And we'll get more. But the fact that we were already at 20%, that he's only 7,600 with eligibility at both forward spots, and now there's no IQ, so we're going to see an uptick back probably toward, this kind of territory. I like the upside there. He could come out and deliver another clunker. He's capable of doing this again, 28 points in 36 minutes. But we've seen the upside already a few times for RJ. And at this price, in this situation, that's going to come out looking pretty good. Field will probably go up alongside the uptick that I expect for him to get in projections everywhere. But I think our ownership probably outpaces the Fields increase, and we probably end up a little bit ahead at that price. That's the only big outlier. Again, you've got good players here. Bobby Portis, you could grab a few shares of. Paul George, you could certainly grab a few of. George has only played 28 minutes a night. I've got him at 30. He did go 33-2 the other day. Not the best game environment on the Philly side of that one. Going to be sharing a little bit of opportunity with Embiid for the time that they're on the court together, too. I don't love that spot, and I'm kind of glad it didn't come up. But, again, a good player that you could get to a little of. Ricochet should probably see a little bit of ownership, 2% and below the field on FanDuel. But if you wanted to grab a few additional shares at 55, we've seen him explode for big scores with missing pieces. 32 minutes projected. I don't mind the play. He's 1-3 on FanDuel. If you want to take a few additional shares there, perfectly fine. Happy that we're not having to go to Najee Marshall here, but he's coming up once or twice in the top 150 on either site. There's just tons and tons of value at his position. So even at 4,000, 5,000 and 4,600, he's just getting boxed out by way, way better values. 0.83 per minute, 13.9% usage this year. Haywood Highsmith could see an additional couple minutes. He's at 30 in the projections. You could see that going Akez's direction. Akez is at 23 here. A little bit of shuffle between those guys, but I think with Miami, you just stick kind of up at the top end and you be better. Otherwise, nobody really standing out. Jump to some centers. Stick around when we're done talking about this, and we will take a quick look at some Ace Mine lineups, and we'll punch out of here in just a little bit. But I want to give you guys a quick look at what came up in the actual constructions that we've been talking about in the background of these percentages. Minor changes already. So Giannis has center eligibility on the DraftKings slate, which is nice. He's a power forward only on FanDuel, but again, a monster piece and your top pay-up guy by a pretty clear margin. Having a ton of Giannis makes a ton of sense. We also got a lot of Brolo. Having those guys together, I think, is perfectly viable on FanDuel. Brolo's 5,200 center only. We got him 35% of the time. There's going to be some crossover there. We got less Bam than the field did. I didn't give Bam quite the nudge that I saw other places give him. He's been at 1.18 per minute in normal situations this year, 1.22 on the FanDuel slate. I gave a little bit more of the nudge to some of the ancillary pieces for Miami. Wouldn't surprise me if Bam came out and played a 1.35 kind of a game, though. That would just level us with the field, but that is a specific positional undercut. Same thing on DraftKings, 23% below the field. I like that we're still getting him in, 1 in 4 lineups, essentially. If you want a little bit more, take a little bit more. Cat is a player I'd be interested in maybe sinking a few additional shares into. That's basically true for all the Knicks. All the top-end Knicks, the starters, and, the guys who get 40 minutes, essentially. Cat's been excellent this year, 1.39 per minute so far. He's seen a little bit of additional usage beyond what he was seeing last year in Minnesota and giving them big, big returns for it after a cold start over the first 3 games. Had a couple New York fans panicking for a minute. 11% below the field on DraftKings, 4% below the field on FanDuel. You could kick him up to 10 there, 15, 20 there and be okay. But you're taking a position on it if you go that high. 15 is more of a realistic, I just grabbed a few more shares. If you added 10-ish points on top, you're doing something very specific to your shares. A little bit of Randall, as we talked about. A little bit of Brolo. Goga did not come up on FanDuel. 24% Goga on DraftKings. Below the field over there. But he's cracked the 5.5 as far as the value score goes. A few guys did here. Looks like more value at the centers than at the forwards. Goga's a 1.19 per minute player on DraftKings, 1.24 on FanDuel. He could come out and have another big day. 31.9 in 21.6 minutes the other day. He's gone up a little bit price-wise. He's going to have the attention of people for sure. The way that he's getting chewed up by other shares, 23% going to Nurk. I don't know that I necessarily go out of my way to pivot into Goga shares there. DraftKings, I think, is important to have. 1 in 4, 1 in 5 maybe, if you wanted to take that. If I was taking a position on Goga on DraftKings, I think I would take him downward, not upward. I don't think I would level that back to the field. I think I would probably take it down to 20 if the field's at say 28, 30. Could burn you with his per minute numbers, but with all the options and with wanting to get more Giannis shares in there, I think that makes some sense. Nurk just looking good, 23% in top 150 on FanDuel, a little below the field, but a solid 5.38 value score. He's just getting chewed up by Brook Lopez at 5.79, a little bit by Bam at 5.40, but that's a good score. And 23% share is not nothing. We got him 34% of the time. He's at 5.69 to lead the position with a value score on DraftKings. 1.08 per minute so far this season. Give him a little bit more than that in this spot against Utah. So yeah, we've got a little uptick in rate for all of Book, Beal, Nurk. And then Allen, I just kind of left alone with where the model wanted him. Which is an uptick over last year and basically reflective of this year anyway. But situationally, I think Nurk gains a little ground here. And honestly, probably could even give him a little bit, slightly more. Last time out, played just 15 minutes, put up 10 points. He's played 24-4 a night. As far as anybody else, Again, 16% Nas on the FanDuel slate. All of these guys in the single digits on DraftKings. I don't think we touch Embiid. Coming in at 10-4 on DraftKings, 11-7 on FanDuel. I just don't think he fits his price. I've got him at 30 minutes. I don't expect he's going to play more than that. Especially not the way they're treating him with kid gloves all season, as far as never going to play on back-to-backs again and so forth. We got a little bit of Portis. We got a little onesie-twosies of Kevin Love. Nothing on those guys over here. Jakob Poeltl didn't really come up. One share of him on FanDuel. Didn't get him on DraftKings. That's a player you could grab a few shares of, though. He's a 5+ value score on FanDuel. Not as much on DK at 4.6. The 7,300 plays a little better on FanDuel than the 76 does on DraftKings. But it doesn't really bounce off all these options in any effective way. Mo Wagner, 10% on FanDuel, minor undercut to the field. He's cheap, 4,800 for 1.11 FanDuel points per minute isn't bad. 4,600 on DraftKings, we barely got him. Keta, assuming the minutes go back to normal, doesn't really seem like a value here. Jonathan Isaac not hitting the board. Good. Not sad to see Jonathan Isaac fall off the board. So, again, keep an eye on this Time Lord situation for sure. I'm going to give him a little bit more than I gave him already, just in a per-minute sense, and catch him back up with a little bit better production. Does look like our one share here was dramatically under the field, but that probably means the field was at 5 shares. But if we get 8 and out, it's going to create a bubble of minutes for basically all the bigs there, and he's going to get at least some of it. The question becomes, does he have the juice to play 26 minutes as opposed to 18 minutes in that situation? That's what I question. But even at 18 for 31 with power forward and center, he's going to become a piece on DraftKings. I doubt that he becomes a piece in that situation on FanDuel. He would need to get into the 20s for minutes at 4,000 center only because of all these better just blockers at that position. Like, he becomes... He doesn't become Kevin Love. He would be better than that. But we already got more of Kevin Love because he's got that power forward eligibility. Yeah, he's not Brolo at 52. He wouldn't go up that high. Yeah, it's not really a good comparison point. Grant Williams, but we're already not getting Grant Williams. Don't love that situation. Gafford and Lively kind of consuming one another's shares down there. Nobody came up. Drummond rendered irrelevant by Embiid. Klingon's another guy to watch in that Portland situation. Got him at 16 minutes, did not hit the board at all. But if he climbs the board at those prices, could get more interesting. Everybody else really not showing much. Rudy Gobert, one share there, no shares here. Capella, didn't get him. Okongwu, I'm sure, is the same thing. Yeah, there's Okongwu down here. Moussa Diabate, that's a standout value score. That's what caught my eye. There's that 5 value score there popped. But that could be an interesting comparison point for Time Lord, right? At 4,200 with a 24-minute projection, 0.85 per minute. They're not the same per minute guy. But like, let's say I give Time Lord 18. Taking him to 21, 22, 23 FanDuel points is about right. It would compare roughly with this. You're getting a little bit less for a little bit more. But I don't think it suddenly creates a situation where he's landing in, again, unless he's projected into the 20s. At most, I think you're getting him 4 or 5% if he goes up to like 18. So again, definitely keep an eye on that. That's about it. Where was Josh Hart? I want to talk about my Knicks. Where are my Knicks? I just love the ability to invest in minutes that the Knicks and Sacramento give us. We really didn't get anybody. Not on FanDuel, a little bit more on DraftKings. Surprised that we didn't get any Hart, but his price, 71, 68. It's kind of level-ish. Jalen, 88 on both sites. Didn't really get, but again, I would take more. OG, didn't get, but I would take some. Definitely some spots there. This is one of your killer opportunity-based spots. Keaton Wallace just gobbling up shares. Justifiably so. Jalen, easy number 2 there. Priced appropriately with an advantageous situation to go out there and dominate his normal production. Milwaukee, you get Giannis. You get this annoying Rollins Green situation that we're going to have to deal with. And then some Brolo. And then everybody else just kind of looking like who they are. But it wouldn't shock me if, say, a Gary Trent or if Pat Connaughton got additional minutes into the 20s. Wouldn't totally shock me if he had a, not like crazy slate breaking day, but a decent 20-point type day. This is one to watch as far as the injury. If we free up 35 minutes, it's going to make other people interesting. Derek White would gain ground as far as just an uptick in things to do. Drew, probably same thing. Jalen, same thing. Sammy Hauser would probably pick up a few additional minutes. Al Horford's also questionable. If he comes off the board with 26 minutes there, that could lead to Ketta or Cornette being valuable again. So Boston is definitely one to watch in that game as well. That's the first game, so we'll have that one early. Let me pull up some Ace Mind here. All right. There's your representation of those DraftKings Goga shares. Crashing the top lineups. Got some Cat there too. Mentioned him as a player that I would be interested in maybe taking a little bit more of. It's nice to see him deliver on the very top of the board. So the most clear thing is that basically all of these lineups have a Keaton Wallace share, which we expected. They have tons of Ryan Rollins in them as well. They have tons and tons of Giannis. Basically every lineup's got a Giannis. Basically every lineup's got a Keaton Wallace. Most of these lineups are also going to have Devin Bookers. You can rotate those shares around different players, though, like this one down here. You get the Keaton Wallace, Garrison Matthews value double pack with Tristan Da Silva packed in there as well alongside Goga. Grayson Allen for value, like mid-board type guy. And then instead of getting the Booker play, you spread out and you're getting Cade and LaMelo along with your Giannis share in that one. So there's different ways to roster that. This one catches the eye a little bit. I don't love KCP in general, but he's perfectly fine. Nothing wrong with it. Wallace, Allen, Grant Williams was a value piece. And then I like the Brolo and Giannis combination that we were seeing come up a decent amount of the time anyway. And the fact that it goes Brolo, Steph, Giannis, Booker, that's really interesting. I like that 4-man group. You could probably do something about this. We got KCP just 3% of the time in the top 150. He's a $4,100 shooting guard. And I got money. I got 200 there. I think out of all those guys, I would look to upgrade that, and I could spend 43 there. So I could go to DeAnthony Melton instead. I think I like that better. I go to... I was going to say Mike Conley, but we can't unless we've got a... What do we have in the guard position? Steph, yeah, we can't do that. I think that's the right answer. I think the pivot of that KCP to Melton, Wallace, Melton, Allen, Grant, Brolo, Steph, Giannis, Booker. I like that. I would play that lineup. I might play that lineup. I'd have to go put money into DraftKings. One of these days I'll start. I was thinking about it the other day because I'm not disqualified from the cheapo tournaments on DK because I just never play over there. So it would be a good way to advertise for the site. Just like jump in the dollars or whatever. Blocked out of everything below $3 on FanDuel. I think the Highsmiths, the Jaquez's of the world are just meh. It's a little bit difficult to parse minutes between those guys. One could see a few more. One could see a few less. But I think they're just kind of are who they are type situations. We had them. Jaquez really didn't come up much. I had him at 23 minutes. Highsmith I have at 30 minutes. He played 33 and a half and put up 26.4 FanDuel points the other day. He's a 0.79 per minute player. FanDuel 0.74 on DraftKings. For the 4,600 on DraftKings at power forward, we got one share of him in our top 150. Basically the same thing on FanDuel at 48. So, I mean, I do think maybe Jaquez could go out there and play a couple additional minutes and see a little bit of additional return. He's a 0.93 per minute player this year. But, like, I don't know. I don't really like anybody on that team not named Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo, or maybe a little bit of Terry Rozier. Outside of that, it's just kind of a blob of, Highsmith, Kevin Love, Jaquez, Jovic, J. Rich, Dunk. Any one of those guys, if he sees 4 additional minutes, 6 additional minutes, could make an okay value. More so on DraftKings at slightly lower prices against the cap. But right now, just kind of in average minutes and situation, I really don't see a major uptick for any one of those guys. I think it just comes from the top. So, again, we are extremely Starsy Scrubsy here. And that's the correct approach with all these super cheap guys. Even if you see some of it peel back, there's plenty to work with. And then you're getting an okay spread on shares among the top lineups, which again tells me that, as you go down this, you would get more and more concentrated on those key guys that were all the way at the top. But there is spread to be had, and you can kind of see it in these top few lineups as we scroll down. We're getting our shares of Ant. We're getting our shares of Cat. We're getting our shares of Markkanen and LaMelo. So that to me is, again, saying that, yeah, there was that big bubble of ownership, but the correct approach is probably more to spread at least some of that out. And a lot of that was created by an artificially low ownership projection that went against this. But again, critical value. Probably critical value. And then a lot of good mid-range values. And then all the Giannis you can handle. FanDuel, for those who care, it's a good contest tonight at least. Luka, Hero, Melton, Ant, Allen, Thompson, Franz, Portis, and Brolo in that top one. Meh. It's interesting that the very first one swaps the Luka for Giannis play. It's just happenstance, of course. We did get 2 shares of both players, though. Luka was a bigger piece on the FanDuel slate. We had 60% Giannis. We had 21% Luka in these lineups. What I'm curious about, I doubt we have them both. I don't think there's that much value on the FanDuel board. There's more value on the DraftKings board. It's probably an either-or situation across all of these. That one's got Giannis and Steph, and Booker, and Markkanen, and Clay. This is kind of a good lineup, especially if you believe in the AJ Green side of that. Nurk, Giannis, Markkanen, Grayson, Booker, AJ Green, Clay, Keaton Wallace, and Steph. That's playable. It's interesting. This is probably an exercise in futility. I don't even know why I really care. I just want to see if it's doable in any of these top 150 to get a Giannis and Luka. I do keep seeing that Melton play popping up. It's interesting for lineup builds. He seems like a decent little forklift. Don't think we get it. Yeah, decent tour of these lineups anyway. Doesn't look like we arrived at any Giannis and Luka, which is not surprising. They're prohibitively expensive. This one's interesting on the back end. Tatum, Giannis, and Bam. Weakens down a little bit here, but you get Hero, you get Suggs, Keaton Wallace, Ryan Rollins, or Ryan Reynolds if you want to play Deadpool. You can play Deadpool too. Tristan Da Silva, creating the value in that lineup. It's kind of an interesting lineup. It's far down our board here, but as I always say, nothing wrong with taking lineups from down this territory. The top 150 out of 67,000 lineups that were built that were then run 150,000 times. So there's variance in here for sure. So don't only live at the very, very top of the board. These are obviously the best lineups. You don't want to play bad results, but there's still good results down here. Overall, FanDuel-wise, it does look like you've got a 1-1 situation with a value at point guard. That situation also exists at shooting guard, but you can go like mid and spend. Like a Clay, Derek White, a Melton, Anthony Edwards, a Booker, Clay. But it's probably one value, one pay up, one value, one pay up. Small forward looks like we're getting more mid or upper mid, right? Barrett and Booker, Jalen and Beal, Booker and Beal. So decent amount of spend going through the small forward, and then spend for sure going through power forward at both spots in almost all of these. And then our solid, mid-priced Brolos, Nurks. Maybe if we can claw our way up to Bam of the world at the center spot. It's interesting though. It's very much spend at power forward, mid at center, as much as you have left to spend at small forward, and then 1-on-1s across the point guard, shooting guard. But if you need to book 2 value spots, it does look like booking 2 value spots at one of the guard positions more than the forward or the center positions is the approach here. Interesting builds for this slate. It's going to be a fun one with this stupid-ass tournament, like I was saying. The possibility that it completely burns you like it did for me last year, but hopefully that doesn't happen. Andy likes Bam on the blue site. We didn't get as much Bam as you might otherwise expect. We got him again. We got him plenty. But it's 26% and a pretty hard undercut to where the field's at. 23%, pretty hard undercut. But again, 1 in 4. If you wanted to kick that up to 1 in every 3.5, perfectly fine. I don't know that I'd take him from 26 to 30 and change, but you could. There is definitely room for Bam to shoot into, I think I said 135 territory. I think if memory serves, he was in that range, or 1.4-ish even, with Butler out in some situations. But right now, we've got more of it residing in Tyler Hero. A little bit downstream for these guys. But really, as far as Miami goes, those are the three players I'm interested in. One of these other guys will probably hit the board as far as a mid-range okay guy. And it's probably Haywood Highsmith at 48, at 46. He could be okay, but I don't really see him crashing the critical value party. Sure thing, Ed. And again, I don't want to take Bam away from you based on that because he's coming in with the potential for more usage, the potential to play a couple additional minutes. He averages 33.9. I've got him at 35, but he played nearly 39 the other day. He kind of underperformed that 39 minutes, but he's got significant upside and rates out as a good value score at 5.4. It's just the field is there, right? So you're going kind of along the path with people, which is not a problem. That's what you want to be doing by and large in basketball. But with the other values and the mid-board types that we saw at that center spot on FanDuel specifically, the Brook Lopez's of the world, who is in here somewhere, and guys like that, he's just getting chewed up a little bit as compared to the field because those guys are lower owned by the field. So we're taking an advantage of having that spot available. We're sinking more of our center shares in there, saving $1,500 to $2,000 at each spot, and spending that on Giannis shares, spending that on Booker and Giannis shares, spending that on Steph and Booker and so on. So it's just, the combinatorics of the slate. Yeah, Amin was a value yesterday for sure. He was one we were on from jump once Freddie was out. That was definitely an interesting spot. I know I was trying to conjure that at the beginning of the show. Getty might be back at the beginning of the show. Missoula said no minutes restriction for Tatum and Brown unless they're up 30 points in the third quarter. That point differential won't matter that much. They're on the front end of a back-to-back. Yeah, fair point about the back-to-back. I hadn't really considered that. If they're up 30 points, they're getting their point differential already anyway. But the best news there, I think, is the no minutes restriction power. But good note there. I appreciate that. Healing with Nature, before the Highsmith question, had also asked about the Celtics being off the table. No, I would never say that. Not at least not at the top of the board. Yeah, I had that configuration in already, and we were getting, I think it just reinforces that this is the situation. But you can always take a few additional shares of Jason Tatum. He's a 1.4 player. You can take additional shares of Jalen. It's not quite in the you can always range, but he's a 30% usage guy. He's a 1 in teens per minute guy with upside for more, and he's priced correctly for that. So either one of those guys, for sure, you can have some. Derek White, any given slate, he's priced correctly, 74. Well, he could be a little cheaper on FanDuel. 72, he could be a little cheaper, but he's fine. It does, it takes away the idea of a Derek White situation being created, and he just comes through it like this level. That's what I mean by saying like it reinforces that this is the situation. But more Tatum, sure. More Brown, no problem. Did we get Horford yet? That's the other thing that could create a, Keta or Cornet situation. Getty says, from watching today, I can confidently say you were way too focused on game totals. Usage and minutes are infinitely more important. Do I not exclusively talk about usage and minutes through all of these? I mentioned the game totals at the beginning of the show and never again. Like the entire show, I refer to the usage and the per minute rates. Did you say that backward, Getty? Right, but I don't talk about the game totals. I don't really know what you're getting at, unless you're just in the first couple minutes of the show. The entire show, all I talk about is usage, minutes, and per minute rates. Am I wrong? Am I saying things that I don't think I'm saying? A few days ago, Charlotte totally was 238, and the game was 98-98 in 4 quarters. Yeah, that'll happen. The game totals are a guideline. But yeah, the the game total informs the environment and sets a dome over what the game might look like, and then the math takes over within that environment. So that's why we reference the game totals at the beginning of the show and then never talk about them again. They're only informative about like the nature of the game. So like, yeah, a couple times during the show, I did say about the Miami game, I think, that it's like grindy, but that's kind of referring to the defensive posture of the teams. The fact that it's only a 1.5 spread. And then when you do look at the game totals, you see a total at 214 compared to a total at 234. And that is telling you that very, very sharp people think that there's 20 additional points to be scored in the Dallas and Golden State game. Do we base everything that we do on that? Absolutely not. Does that inform the back end of projections for me and literally everybody who does this? Of course. It's where the bubble of what the shape of the game looks like, and then you throw everything into that bubble, and then minutes, rates, combinations, combinatorics, and so on and so forth dictate who you get to and why. So this is not, as I've said a million times over the years, this is not really fantasy basketball. This is just math camp. Congratulations, you guys are all just doing math every day. You might not know it, but that's what this is. Low-scoring games usually equals more steals, more blocks, and more rebounds. I would have to look at actual numbers to say whether that's correct or incorrect, but all of those things are accounted for in how the projections come together. Find me a projection where I'm off by like 10 points on somebody. Out of everybody we talked about, find me somebody where somebody else is saying like, nope, that guy from Detroit is going to score 15 more points than this idiot says. That's all swept up in how the model works. So that's what creates these projections. There's only so many things. I mean, I already run ridiculously long for a one-person show talking about these games. I could sit here and focus on everything and talk about every possible angle for every player, and we'd cover 5 guys. The Houston Rockets game last night went under 200 points, and Şengün had 60 fantasy points, and Amen had 50. Okay. Yeah, that'll happen. That is a standard deviation. It's one standard deviation for where I had Şengün, and it's like a 2 standard deviation for Amen. But Amen was the entire show we talked about him. He was our top-owned guy on that show. Him, Tari Eason, Şengün were all critical values on our show yesterday. David says, and I'm really bad at math. Victor Wembanyama can have 22 rebounds and 7 blocks in a game where San Antonio struggled to score 90 points. Again, of course. And that's all in here. And then it's the happenstance of what actually happens on the court. As the old expression goes, it's why they play the games. There's never going to be a day where I'm directionally off by more than 4 or 5 points if you pick any other site in the industry and any player in their projections and my projections. I'm telling you right now. And that's true for if you take Awesomo's projections and you compare them to RG's projections or FTN's projections or whoever. It's just the way that these numbers work. Yes, of course that can happen. That's why we play the game. That's where the wins and losses come from. If everybody just went out and did exactly what the math said they should do, exactly what we projected them for, it would be a really stupid, boring game with a whole lot of ties. Mamba, if you're looking for a pivot from Giannis, I mean, it's just Giannis. He looks incredible today, and we're getting tons and tons of them versus the field. But the only like price comparable guy would be Luka. Totally different position. But on FanDuel, we got Luka a lot more than we got on DraftKings. And obviously, you're doing something radically different there. At a different price point, maybe Tatum with the power forward eligibility. You're sacrificing 11 points of projection, 0.2 of a point per minute. But Tatum could equal Giannis on any given night. David says the pivot off of Giannis is two other high-priced guys. I'm going to Brunson and Ant. I don't dislike that decision. We saw that come up in The Sims. Again, I think it is a critically good Giannis day, and we didn't get a lot of those guys because of how much he's getting, how many shares he's consuming. But those are two high-end guys who I highlighted through the show as those are guys that you want to be able to take a few more shares of when you can. So, yep, that is definitely a situation to go to. Cody Martin in, man out. 6:04. Woof. We went long. Let me punch out of here, guys. Good chat today. Appreciate all the questions. Appreciate the back and forth. As always, this is a discussion, not a lecture. You guys absolutely rock. Keep an eye on the site. Some critical updates coming in pretty soon in the next couple of minutes. Rotoscouts.com. Everything is under $1 a day for access to NBA, NHL, and NFL. Projections for all three sports. A lot of content for NFL main slates during the week. A lot to do. I got to go tackle it. Let me get out of here. Good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. I'll see you tomorrow for more NBA. Later, guys.